What if one of the first things you learned about space is actually misleading? If I ask you a simple question, which planet is closest to Earth? Most people confidently answer Venus. Some might say Mars. And honestly, that feels right. You've seen the image before. The sun on one side, planets lined up in order, each one spaced neatly from the next. It's simple, easy to remember, easy to believe. But that picture isn't reality. It's a shortcut. Because in real life, planets are not standing still in a straight line. They are constantly moving, racing through space, orbiting the sun in large stretched paths called ellipses. And that changes everything. At any given moment, the distance between planets is always shifting. Sometimes two planets are close. Other times, they're on completely opposite sides of the sun. Take Venus, for example. When Venus is positioned between Earth and the sun, it becomes one of the closest planets to us. It shines brightly in our sky, often called the morning star or evening star. But as it continues its orbit, it eventually moves to the far side of the sun. And when that happens, Venus isn't close anymore. It becomes incredibly distant, farther away than you might expect. The same thing happens with Mars. Sometimes Mars comes relatively close to Earth, especially during certain points in its orbit. That's when it appears brighter and larger in the night sky. But most of the time, Mars is much farther away. So here's the problem. If planets are always moving, always changing positions, then the question, which planet is closest? It depends on when you ask it. So scientists approach the question differently. Instead of looking at one moment in time, they asked, which planet is closest to Earth most of the time? And to answer that, they tracked the distances between planets continuously as they moved through their orbits. Not a snapshot, but the full motion. And the result was unexpected. The planet that stays closest to Earth on average is not Venus. It's not Mars. It's Mercury. At first, that sounds completely wrong. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It feels like it should be far away from Earth most of the time. But here's what really matters: orbit size. Mercury has the smallest orbit of all the planets. It travels in a tight path, staying relatively close to the sun at all times. On the other hand, planets like Earth, Venus, and Mars have much larger orbits. They swing much farther out into space. Because of that, they spend long periods being very far from each other. Mercury doesn't. It stays in a smaller region, never drifting too far away. So while Mercury isn't always the closest at any single moment, it is consistently closer more often than the others. Over time, that makes all the difference. It becomes the closest planet on average. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This idea doesn't just apply to Earth. If Mercury is closest to Earth most of the time, what about other planets? You might expect different answers. Maybe Venus is closest to Mars. Maybe Earth is closest to Jupiter. But when scientists ran the same calculations for every planet, tracking distances over time, they found something surprising. The answer didn't change. Again and again, the same result appeared. Mercury. Mercury is closest to Earth most of the time. Mercury is closest to Venus most of the time. Mercury is closest to Mars, and even closest to massive distant planets like Jupiter. In fact, Mercury is the closest planet to every planet in the solar system, most of the time. It's a result that feels almost impossible when you first hear it, because it goes against the image you've had in your head for years. But that image was never meant to be perfectly accurate. It was designed to simplify something incredibly complex. The real solar system isn't a straight line. It's not static. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. A dynamic system where distance is never fixed. And once you start thinking in terms of motion over time, instead of position at a single moment, the answer becomes clear. Closeness isn't about who is next in line. It's about who stays near the longest. And by that measure, the smallest planet, the one often overlooked, Mercury is the most consistent neighbor in the entire solar system, not because it comes closest once, but because it never goes too far away.